Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Rana Maqbool with you at PTV World. In today's show, we will be taking a look at two very important stories. The first is in reference to political developments in the country, especially in the aftermath of the meeting that a number of PTI lawmakers had with the National Assembly Speaker and talked about their resignations and the acceptance of the mass resignations that were given by PTI lawmakers after the ouster of the former Prime Minister earlier this year. And in the aftermath of which we saw that only 11 resignations were accepted, something that was taken to the courts by the PTI. The petition was rejected by the Islamabad High Court, and then the PTI went on to the Supreme Court, where this plea is still pending. In today's meeting, we also saw again what was reiterated in the past by the National Assembly Speaker, that the PTI MNAs will be expected to come in and talk about their resignations and show evidence of this being a voluntary act and not something that was done under duress, and that this is the only way that resignations will be accepted one by one and not in the form of mass resignations, which the PTI is emphasizing upon. The PTI, of course, also talked about how this was a move to call in more fresh elections in the country and how that was the need of the hour. And in the aftermath of this meeting, they have talked about how they are going to be going to the courts again. There's also, of course, the decision coming in from the PTI to hold mass protests across the country against inflation and rising difficulties for the economic situation, which is going to be starting from tomorrow. The PTI lawmakers are going to be taking the lead for now after a couple of weeks, where the PTI chairman will then be joining in. We'll, of course, be talking a little bit about that as well and how the strategy is going to go ahead with. Of course, there's also the dissolution of the Punjab and KP assemblies that the PTI still has its stance on, something, of course, that is also at the current moment subject to court's decision, with the hearing coming in on the 11th with the issue of course, the governor's decision and the speaker's ruling in the matter. We also, of course, know that the National Assembly Speaker has reiterated the need for the PTI lawmakers to return to the Parliament and to talk at the floor of the House, where, of course, the important decisions and debate needs to be held. And this is something that has been emphasized once again in the meeting as well. He, however, has also reiterated again that mass resignations will not be accepted. This is not something that is going to go ahead as the PTI plans it to. So we're going to be taking a look at what this means, what the legalities are, and of course what the current political setup is going to be doing, as well as the PTI strategy moving forward. In our next segment, we'll be taking a look at, of course, a little bit of what has happened around the world throughout this year. Unfortunately, since COVID times, the entire world is facing a lot of crises, one after the other. And then, of course, post-COVID, we expected the prices to rise in 2021, but 2022 added in more trouble with, of course, the Ukrainian conflict going on, rising inflation, and, of course, the climate change issues that has also impacted countries, including Pakistan. And because of this, of course, there are serious challenges to the economy going forward in 2023 as well, which, of course, Pakistan is also a huge part of. There are many economic concerns for Pakistan in the remaining fiscal year, as well as climate change challenges, considering, of course, global factors and how exactly we're going to deal with them. That is going to be the focus in our second segment of this show today, where we're going to take a look at what factors contributed to where we stand today throughout this year and how that's going to trickle down in the next one. For this and more, as always, in the studios, I've been joined by senior analyst Farooq Patafi, and for our first segment with regards to the political situation in the country, we've been joined by Mr. Rana Maqbool Ahmad, Senator PMLN. Thank you very much, Rana Saab, for being a part of the debate. Welcome. As always. Rana Saab, let me start off with you, considering, of course, that the talk of mass resignations is something that the PTI has been emphasizing upon since the ouster of the former Prime Minister. And we've seen, of course, that this has always been met by rejection coming in from the National Assembly Speaker, reiterating the fact that whatever is going to happen in terms of the acceptance will be according to the Constitution and the rules of procedure. And something that was reiterated by him again today, that mass resignations will not be accepted, and they will be accepted one by one. Of course, the PTI wants to see it happen otherwise. But when we take a look at the decision of the National Assembly Speaker, we, of course, want to understand how exactly this is going to go ahead. We, of course, have seen that the PTI has talked about its own reservations. They've earlier also moved the courts on this matter. But as far as the National Assembly is concerned and the PMLN is concerned, do you think that this is perhaps the only way forward and the Constitution and rules of procedure allow for no other possibility for this to go ahead with?
Thank you, Sana. My salam to Patafi Sahib, an icon of commentary on all current issues. Let's examine the legal aspect of this total venture by the PTI. If you go through Article 64 of the Constitution of Pakistan, you will very well understand there is a very clear provision that the resignation has to be written in hand by the member of the National Assembly. Number two, if the Speaker does have any information or suspicion or doubt that this resignation is not voluntary, he is not duty bound to accept the resignation. This is what Article 64 of the Constitution is. So therefore, there is no scope of their acceptance of resignation. Speaker's position is impregnable, constitutional, and absolutely legalistic. They are creating confusion. They want standoff, and they are successful in maintaining the standoff. Now their fate in the Supreme Court. They went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court advised them to get back to the Parliament. That's the solution to the issue. Now, if you examine Razak case of 1994 by the full bench of the Supreme Court, full court bench, they very clearly given a verdict that the resignations will only be accepted, number one, if they are written in hand by the MNAs, or it is also voluntary. And it is mentioned very clearly, if the Speaker does have reason to believe that this resignation is not voluntary, he is not supposed to accept a resignation. So you might have heard Mr. Fawad making a statement that we want collective resignation. What I understand and construe from that, even Mr. Fawad doesn't want to present a resignation. Because if you insist on collective, it doesn't mean it is not legal. So it cannot materialize. So you might have heard people saying that 99% legislators are not ready to present their resignations. There is an indicator that there's a lot of schismatic situation within the PTI. Their main leadership, for example, their vice chairman, he didn't turn up today. He had to come to represent his fellow MNAs for the presentation of the resignations. He didn't come. And number two is their stalwart, Mr. Pervez Khattak. He didn't come. So I don't think so this thing can very conveniently materialize. They created confusion. Let them create confusion. And finally, I may assure you, right from day one, I've been insisting on this issue that they'll have to come back to the Parliament. There is no other solution to this problem. And they are trying to get the situation aggravated, which they'll not be able to because they are not going to dissolve the provincial assemblies as well.
Okay, Rana Sahab, I'll come to that point. You've shared your opinion on that previously as well. But let me ask you another question with regards to the issue of the Deputy Speaker accepting the resignations, because that is something that was pointed out by the PTI as a reasoning in terms of the legality that the National Assembly Speaker needs to go ahead with the mass resignations. Is that so?
No, that is there. I was sitting in the House when he declared about the acceptance of the resignations. That's illegal. Each individual MNA has to appear in person and he has to convince the Speaker that he is seriously want to resign. And if the Speaker is, even then, if the Speaker is convinced that he is under pressure or he is having some temptations, so the Speaker is not supposed to accept a resignation. This is what the law is. Right. This is what the Constitution is. So it's not very easy for the Speaker to bypass the Constitution. He has to abide by the provisions of the Constitution.
Right, of course. Farooq, considering, of course, that this is being used as a political strategy by the PTI, can you tell me if there's any precedence in terms of any mass resignations? Has this ever happened in the past before in the Provincial Assembly or the National Assembly that there has been a collective acceptance of resignations?
Right, Sana, and that is a good question because that actually takes us back to 2014 when PTI more or less did exactly the same thing. Even then, they actually collectively resigned from the National Assembly. At that time, their resignations were not accepted. And after that, what happened, Sana, was quite interesting. You know, later on, they wanted their own members to individually present themselves to the speaker and, you know, confirm their resignations. But 5 people, 5 very important electables actually refused to comply. And then there was talk of a forward block, particularly in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. And since then, we haven't seen similar kind of an example, right? This can something else can happen. For example, MQM used to actually nominate people who would come and become parliamentarian. Whenever their founder actually ordered them, they would, you know, tender resignation and go away. But they had to actually in person confirm it. But I just started off with answering your question, but I wanted to actually reciprocate Rana Saab's salam. My salam to you as well, sir. At that time also I reciprocated. Perhaps you didn't hear that because you were speaking. I thought that I will do it again. Sana, there are 2 or 3 things which are very important. In your introduction, you said that today they presented themselves. There were 8 members who actually went and met him. Amazingly, they did not even take their own resignations along. So that is something very interesting going on. But then you also spoke about something else that was put to tests, right? They are going to put to test now inflation. So far it was not happening that way. Something else was being, you know, there were protests but about something else. And usually it was centered around Imran Khan Saab's person or persona. This time it is not happening. Why? There is a difference. Because suddenly PTI has realized that all this drip of leaks has started affecting his popularity. That's why they are actually deflecting and they're focusing on something else. Mind you, the thing that they should have focused from day one, they did not. And right now they are trying to actually go there, but there won't be any kind of response. But regarding today's meeting also, Sana, we have heard very interesting stories. We have heard that the you know, Speaker National Assembly, who is also a former Prime Minister, has spoken to the media and in confidence has told them that 22 members of PTI have reached out to him individually and said that they don't want to resign. And out of those 22, 6 actually have claimed that their resignation on the cyclo-style collective resignation were also forged. So there has to be an investigation of if that is the case. Because if you remember, the Supreme Court of Pakistan, when it was deliberating on this matter, somehow nobody, I think, actually presented this case. We keep on actually confusing Pakistan with UK because we are also called a Westminster democracy. But unlike UK, where you have proportional representation, in Pakistan, each ticket is auctioned by the parties. And whosoever buys those tickets actually goes and spends hell lot of money, and then they actually win individually, and then they actually they become members. So it is not merely party's platform. Party's platform is important also, but the individual candidature matters as well. So you cannot claim that they all are, you know, a herd of sheep, and you can just say that en masse, if one resigns, the rest have to resign as well. By the way, there is no law which supports the idea of party discipline actually extending itself to the odd resignations, because when you resign, you're quitting the parliament, then the parliamentary system cannot actually reach out to you, right? So this is a very important point.
That's
remember it. Yeah. So at this moment, all this muscle flexing and everything is okay, but I tell you, PTI tried to have a power grab and it failed. Now it is facing the consequences.
Absolutely. Rana Sahab, earlier you were starting off with the issue of the dissolution of assemblies as well, and I'll add in a question with regards to that. Another one, since I've been told that's the only question we have time for now for this segment. So I'm going to speak about that as well with regards to the PTI chairman's decision of bringing in everyone from the Punjab Assembly together, including the PMLQ, and talking about a way forward in terms of course, what is going to happen within the Assembly in January. And then, of course, with regards to the protests that Farooq was earlier mentioning as well, this is of course a new aspect that is being highlighted now with regards to the economic situation that we haven't heard before. And then of course is also the talk of the establishment of a technocrat government that is also being mentioned by the PTI chairman. He hasn't spoken of course with regards to the issue of elections not happening anytime soon previously, but now that seems to be the case, and that also is a change. Can you also help us identify and understand exactly what is going on, perhaps also clarify things for PTI themselves and for us in terms of where this is going and what's happening? Is there any intention or any move towards a technocratic government being installed? And then, of course, with regards to the dissolution and protests, what do you make of it?
Mr. Khan, he dwells in the world of hallucinations. I've been already indicating very humbly there's some psychological issues as well. So he lives in a world of fantasy. He doesn't live in a world of real. So unfortunately, who tells him that there will be a technocratic government? I don't know from where has he landed. It's only rumoring, nothing else.
Okay.
Number two, if he thinks that he'll be able to dissolve the Punjab Assembly, he's very sadly mistaken. It will not happen. Number one, Professor Ali is not prepared. His son has already left for abroad. Why did he leave at this critical juncture? You can very well interpret that. So there is no question because their legislators are not prepared to resign. Mr. Patafi has very rightly remarked that they have spent money, they have spent time, they have given their sweat into it. Why should they waste 1 year of their tenure in the national assemblies? In the assemblies, the members of the National Assembly of PTI, they are grumbling so much. So many people meet us and they criticize the policies of their leader. So most of the time, he's taking suicidal steps, which are not going to yield any results for him except for disappointment time and again. Now he has gone for agitation. He has given a call. When his agitation to gather mammoth crowds into millions that petered out and miserably failed. Whatever agitation he can raise now. So this agitation is just an eyewash. This is not going to work. Mr. Patafi is absolutely correct. So I personally think all his ventures are going to be fruitless because he has not given proper constitutional, parliamentary, and democratic line of action. He always tries to bulldoze things, which is not working. And even the people who matter, all of them are convinced that he is not a balanced man. He cannot deliver. So let's not waste time. We've already wasted much of our time, and that has gone to the detriment of the national interest. So that is the writing on the wall. He should consider doing something else. No, everything is on decay. This is what is writing on the wall.
All right.
How long people can wait for his luxuries of doing very strange things every time in the morning, in the afternoon? He is Arab. He is totally an idiosyncratic personality, unfortunately.
Right, I understand
so
that.
This is about what
anything
my
you'd like to add? We're short on time, Rana Sahab, and we'll continue the discussion soon. Yes, Farooq.
Right, Sana, very quickly, I just wanted to point out that the power grab I was talking about and this technocrat setup, a lot of embeds, PTI embeds are there in the media and also in YouTube. Because of those tubers and all, I don't want to call them tumors, but tubers are there. they keep on spreading these rumors that army actually consulted this finance minister or this, former governor, state bank. And usually army has the capacity and the structures to actually consult, all the technocrats, because that is usually how they get information about national security. So they actually construct this storyline where somehow there's going to be some kind of technocratic setup, and because of that, then everybody from across the board, start criticizing army, and that is something that you have to really, really understand, Sana. April 9th to this day, all these attempts to, criticize and somehow slander the military leadership is really, really sad, and it is dangerous because right now army is doing nothing but fight terrorism. What I would say that the new leadership of army, because it has been very clear, the army chief and the chairman joint chief of staff committee, you have to remember that everybody who's trying to divide either the nation against the army or the army itself, because there are people who are retired sitting abroad and actually doing YouTube videos.
Right.
They have to be defeated, and they are against, they are playing with fire, and they are dangerous for the country right now. For heaven's sake, support the leadership, because they are trying to do the right thing.
Right, absolutely. Thank you very much, Rana Saab, for joining us and being a part of the debate. We'll conclude the segment over here, take a short break, and continue with the next one. Welcome back to the debate. We're now going to be taking a look at where we stand today in terms of the kind of global factors that have shaped this current year and what the new year seems to be bringing in. This, of course, is important in terms of the kind of economic concerns that Pakistan has, perhaps the kind of economic concerns that the entire world shares, in light of course, what is going on in terms of the conflicts that are marked within this year, then, of course, the global recession issues and also issues with regards to climate change and many others. Which of course is something that we're dealing with in a post-pandemic era. Considering all of this, it's important to understand where we stand today in terms of all of these issues and how exactly we're going to be dealing with them in the next year. There have been reports coming in that perhaps next year is also not going to bring us many good news, but how exactly can we change that, or what sort of factors are going to contribute to that, is what we're going to try and focus right now. For this segment, we've also been joined online by Dr. Ghulam Samad, who's an economist at the Carrick Institute, Asian Development Bank. Thank you very much, Dr. Ghulam Samad, for joining us and being a part of the debate. And let me start with you, considering, of course, that when we talk about the next year and the current year as well, the kind of crisis situation that currently the world is experiencing is something which is being pointed out as perhaps one of the hardest times in global history. And I understand that there have been, of course, great economic concerns in the past as well. But how exactly would you differentiate where we stand today in terms of what happened in this particular year and how things are expected in the next one as markedly difficult or significant in terms of what previous years have brought us? Is there something of concern that perhaps the world hasn't dealt with in the past?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I think if we look into the exogenous, I would say, factors so far, I think significantly the 2022 was impacted by the COVID disruption. On top of the COVID disruption, the Russian-Ukraine war, that was something again basically bringing more uncertainty to the market. So these were the two biggest factors, I would say, the COVID-19 disruption and the Russian-Ukraine war that bring in more uncertainty to the markets. So if we can look into the kind of underlying factors in 2022, and if we can connect the dots with the COVID-19 and the Russian-Ukraine war, I think significantly we can see the impact in 2022 on the inflation. In particular, if we can look into the food inflation, it has significantly impacted in Pakistan as well, though we are kind of less or somehow more integrated with the food in the region. So that is something I think we can significantly see there. Now, if we can look into the supply chain disruption, that was again related to the Russian-Ukraine war. That again bring in uncertainty into the markets and also increase the prices globally, regionally, and of course in Pakistan as well. Second, I think the related factor that is the energy concerns, and we all know that how significantly globally the Russian-Ukraine war had impacted and also, I can also see a similar kind of a concern for 2023 as well. But this was the second thing I think that has also significantly impacted the regional, global, and Pakistan economies as well. In thirdly, if we can look into the current low productivity in globally, and of course the recession that has been prevailing in the European region, particularly, that is again significantly impacted. And the fourth factor that is again associated with the COVID and the Russian-Ukraine war, that is the underlying factor with the bull market. I don't think we can expect something like very promising for the bull markets or stock exchange markets in 2023. So if I can sum up the 2022, I think in terms of the food inflation, in terms of the energy inflation, in terms of the low productivity, and also in terms of the performance of the stock exchanges in terms of the bull market, that was not very promising for us. So based on these underlying factors, I think for 2023, again, the picture is bleak, though it significantly depend on the COVID-19 kind of relaxation. That is, especially the promising thing is now opening up of the Chinese economies, and hopefully I think the related or the integrated economies, and particularly in Pakistan, probably can get more benefit from it. But
Right.
overall, in terms of the energy, in terms of the recession, I don't think like, the 2023 will be significantly different from 2022.
All right. Let me also welcome in the debate Dr. Abid Qayyum Sudairi, who's Executive Director at SDPI. Thank you very much, Abid Saab, for joining us and being a part of the debate. Earlier, we were speaking to Dr. Ghulam Samad, and he was outlining the underlying factors that have shaped the global economy within this year and what is going to also predictably impact the economy within the next year. And perhaps a lot of those concerns are something that is going to affect most populations, especially with regards to COVID variants or the kind of conflicts that also seem to not be ending, in particularly the Ukrainian crisis at the moment, and how that's going to impact and has already impacted food security and energy concerns. But considering, of course, that when we take a look at the remaining fiscal year, particularly for Pakistan, all of these challenges are also impacting our local economy and our local decisions as well. And we're, of course, dealing with issues with the IMF, with regards to, of course, rising inflation. That also, again, is among the global concerns. What do you think in terms of all of these global factors also coming in within the next year? How limiting do you think it's going to be for the kind of measures or strategies that Pakistan can take in order to mitigate the impact of such factors? And if we can do something about these, does this have to be perhaps on a more global scale, or do you think that this will naturally take its course and will impact the international community as the trends are predicting?
Thank you very much. If one looks back at 2022, the last 6 months of this fiscal year, there are triple C crises, COVID, conflict, and climate change that actually shaped the economic landscape of the planet. And unfortunately, it was the impact of all three. It was quite negative on economies. In case of Pakistan, I would add another C here, which is complacency. And I can say that unfortunately, we remained complacent, and I'm hinting at political uncertainty. While all of these factors, they had a negative impact on Pakistan's economy, I think it's political uncertainty that actually aggravated their effect. Throughout 2022, we have been listening about Pakistan flirting with default, and if anything, that stopped us from actual defaulting. It was a balancing act. Our relations with China, relations with Gulf countries, especially Saudi Arabia, and relation with America. And if one looks at the debt structure, we owe almost 30% of our debts to China, about 30% to Gulf countries, a major part of which is to Saudi Arabia, but also to UAE and Qatar, and around 20% to IMF, World Bank, and Paris Club, for which our relation with America, they matter a lot. But due to political uncertainty, one can argue that at times even the friendly countries, they were reluctant and they were compelled to wait and see what unfolds in Pakistan's political landscape before they could actually provide us a rollover, or they could help us in our dealing with IMF and with other international financial institutes. Now,
Right.
going
Yes, go ahead.
forward, perhaps, yeah, this complacency and all these factors, they would be there, but 2023 would be different from 2022 in a way that I can see the new emerging this geopolitical alignment. It is very rapidly becoming West versus rest of the world. And on Russia-Ukraine war, if Pakistan is compelled to choose sides, America or China, that would be extremely difficult situation for Pakistan. And one actually hopes that this war doesn't escalate further. But after this winter, if Russia escalates its attacks and NATO and America with Ukraine with the help of a Patriot missile that it is getting from America, if the war escalates, I think that would put countries like Pakistan into a difficult choice and difficult situation.
Right, absolutely. And Farouk, considering, of course, whenever we take a look at outlooks or reports or things with regards to where countries stand, there's a lot in terms of numbers that are being shared, a lot of impact that is being talked about on perhaps at a higher level or at the state level, and how that's going to impact relations or economic concerns within the countries. But what do these numbers and outlooks also mean for you and me, for people on the ground, for human development, for our abilities to function or to be able to make important decisions? Because that, of course, is also one of the largest concerns.
Right, Sana, and that is, again, you surprised me with the questions. I thought that we are going to go back to the global outlook because I had, many things to say there.
You can add
but,
to that.
But regarding impact on our lives, I think at this moment, when the country is going through this special phase of stagflation, where prices are very high, but jobs are not there. They are reduced. They are not going up. There, for common man, it becomes really difficult because you cannot revise the salaries in accordance with the price hike, and that actually reduces the purchasing capacity. And then, of course, because there are many factors which might not actually be internal to Pakistan's system, because IMF keeps on demanding some kind of corrections. There's going to be more complications, and that's why I think the poor, very poor of the country, and then lower middle class. I consider myself in that. But the middle class also, it is shrinking, and poverty is increasing in this country, and because of that there is going to be complications. Usually what happens is that thanks to the generosity of donors and multilateral institutions, IMF and others, you get some kind of targeted interventions for the very poor of the country who are very vulnerable. But the middle class, nobody thinks about that, right? Because again, purchasing capacity is impossible. I know for a fact that there are people who have to actually ration money to actually select what are they going to pay for. Are they going to pay for children's education, or their food, or the family's transportation, because you have to reach from point A to point B, you need some transportation, and that also needs some kind of money, right? Or something else. And I know also of people, especially coming, visiting tuck shops and other shops like that, who have actually reduced the consumption of proteins. Eggs have, they have reduced consumption of eggs for the family. They have reduced chicken. Chicken is also getting very expensive. It used to be the common man's food, a staple, right, a source of protein. So it means really negative things for the common man on the street,
Right.
unfortunately. I would like to talk about global outlook, but in the next phase, when you go back to the other guests, and then you come back to
All
me.
right. Dr. Ghulam, earlier Abid Saab was talking about the 3 Cs, and you mentioned them, of course, in terms of the underlying factors, the climate change issues, conflict, and then, of course, the COVID-19. But when we take a look at all of these, it seems that perhaps there are multiple ways that these have impacted the economy, and a lot of them seems to be something that isn't being taken a look at in terms of a global or collective response. Of course, conflicts continue. There's condemnations, but not much is happening. COVID variants are still springing up. And then the issue of climate change, even though there are important decisions taken at COP27, we haven't really seen anything happening in terms of an actual infrastructure or implementation. So how exactly are we going to cover these 3 Cs in the next year?
Well, definitely, and thanks for the great question. I don't, again, based on the climate things, right? The COP27 that was happened, we had the Pakistan got lucky in terms of bringing in the loss and damages into the agenda. But I think the fundamental, I would say, issue for all the global world, I would say, is that now how we can develop the financing framework. That is unfortunately did not discuss. So I think for the next year, I think now they decided the 24 members countries I think they will be part of the agenda and for discussion. But the biggest issue would be how you can bring in the financing framework that basically will definitely help the Pakistan and the other developing countries. So in terms of the how we can bring in that thing and that can help Pakistan, I think still we need lots of diplomacy there. And we are lucky there that we bring in some good diplomacy there to bring in at least the loss and damages into the agenda. And I do hope for the next year when we work with the with the developing countries along with the developed countries as well. Probably we can, I think, at least generate some financing for the climate issues as well. But
All
in
right.
terms of the right.
Right. Let me go to Abid Saab since we're short of time very quickly. Abid Saab, considering, of course, that the international financial institutions have an important role to play as well, how exactly do you think that is going to impact the way that there are global responses and how the international community is collectively going to look at such issues? And then also when we take a look at what is being talked about, there are reports coming in of global economic growth still moving forward in 2023 as well. How is that aligned with the concerns that we're sharing?
Well, looking at the macro picture, if we remember, in COP27 there was this demand from 200 countries on international financial institutes to be more climate responsive and think of climate vulnerabilities of developing countries while they take their lending decisions. Although IMF and World Bank, etc., they don't fall under COP27 mandate, but coming up of this consensus demand from international community means that IFIs they are requested to review their lending framework, and that this sort of demand is important for Pakistan, which is right now due to many reasons the ninth review of IMF is in limbo, and we know that Pakistan is making a plea that it has to revise its macroeconomic framework due to flood losses, and we are not able to find much of a leeway. Now, of course, in the context of this climate change and uncertain weathers, extreme weathers, these institutions, they have to be more flexible, they have to be more climate responsive, and they have to be more efficient in their decision making, just like as they did in case of COVID when they had rapid financial instrument, RFI. Pakistan was also one of the beneficiaries of those RFIs at the beginning of COVID. We need to think of climate change as an existential threat
Right.
to humanity and to planet, and these IFIs, they can play a very important role. Quickly on growth, I don't see much of growth happening in 2023.
Okay.
Most of the pundits, they're saying that inflation would tame down, but at the cost of growth. So a very high interest rate all over the world, they would bring inflation under control. But in doing that, perhaps most of the countries, they would enter into a slow growth period of a sort of recession. Germany and UK, they have already entered in recession, and many other European countries, they are following it.
Right, absolutely. Farooq, your take on the global outlook.
Right. Sana, I respect what our worthy guests are saying, but when you look at the global, predictors and people who are actually talking about these matters, today's reality is that, there's a lot of inflation, which means that the economies around the world were heating up, right, after COVID and because of the infusion of a lot of money. But that also actually indicates something very interesting that might be actually coming from the West, and that is intellectual dishonesty, because it seems that the world is now divided between the liberal and the libertarian worldview, right? And the libertarians are actually predicting that because the American government and other governments keep on, controlling various dynamics, because of that the economy is going to slow down and there is going to be a cooling effect. But coming from a heating up situation to a cooling off situation, that is quite a distance to actually cover. I understand UK's condition because we saw their currency also dipping, and we also saw that there were many other complications, right? You can even understand Germany's situation, because Germany is in a kind of bind where it is sitting so close to Russia and the circumstances and the industrial trust in that situation. But when you talk about global outlook, I mean, they are very healthy economies. America itself is a very healthy economy. One example I want to give you of intellectual dishonesty is Larry Summers, right? Professor Larry Summers, who was head of Harvard and who was also, economic advisor to President Obama. He kept on sleeping till the time, President Trump was offering all the financial handouts. But suddenly when Biden administration comes, he says, don't do the same thing because it is going to destroy the economy, right? At this moment, there's a lot of intellectual dishonesty. I understand that in China, because of zero COVID policy, there could have been a humongous shock to the system. But right now, where the economy is at, or the global economy, I don't think that it is written in stone that there is going to be a recession.
Okay.
Right? It kind of reminds me of the, one fictional series, Rick Riordan's, Heroes of Olympus, where all the gods of Olympus, right, they split into two personalities, one Greek, one Roman. So same facts, but similar, different pundits keep on predicting different things. I don't think we are a shoe-in for global recession, and all these pundits, especially the international one, when they keep on talking about it, they seem to want to have that outcome, which is not acceptable.
All right. Well, there's the hope. Dr. Ghulam Samad, thank you very much for joining us. Dr. Abid Qayyum Suleri, thank you for being a part of the debate. And thank you for being a part of the discussion. As always, that's all that we have from the debate at the moment. And of course, we're hoping to enter the new year with, of course, positivity and optimism. And we hope that we are able to deal with the challenges that lie ahead. That's all that we have from the debate. We'll see you tomorrow.